my eye. Through the mist, my surprise shone light from distant northern skies. At that point, I realized I don't know where it comes from, but I know it's okay. If this is all an illusion, then I'm willing to play.
Welcome to the Quantum Guide Show, interviews with awakened masters as they share their quantum work with you. The Quantum Guide Show is produced by Karen Holton, creator of the 9 Steps to Quantum Health Transformation, a free 9-step online course to give you the tips and resources you need to thrive. Karen lost and continues to keep off 178 pounds of surplus body weight as she made her dreams come true. Whether you are awakening to the ascension process or simply want a wiser, more efficient lifestyle, this program is for you. No strings attached. The Quantum Guide Show is brought to you in part by Zendome's Orgonite, Karen's unique brand of orgone generators, ethically sourced, handmade, and double charged for maximum effect. Find out how orgone generators work and what they can do for you. Don't be fooled by imitations. Check out Karen's current selection, only available from her website, KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com, and on Facebook, facebook.com/Quantum Health Transformation. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to episode 46 of the Quantum Guide Show. I'm very happy to introduce you to our returning guest today. Dan Willis is one of the top secret military witnesses that testified at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. in 2001, in front of the major mainstream media of the world. This world disclosure event was prompted by U.S. government officials who were being illegally denied access to unacknowledged special access projects. Dan and the other witnesses served as participants who hoped to release the hidden advanced technologies derived from reverse engineering extraterrestrial technologies. It was hoped that they could stop further damage to Earth, as well as acknowledge the extraterrestrial presence on our planet. Instead, the message was sanitized from the public view by controlled mainstream media. From his personal firsthand experiences and from looking into the historical indicators that have been purposely omitted from our education system, Dan found that there was an infiltration of unwarranted influences operating behind the secrecy. This was used to control the public's perception that forms our agreed upon reality, to hide their illegal operations, and why they fear disclosing the truth about the extraterrestrial reality. As an ex-radio broadcast engineer and ABC newsman, Dan Willis has taken a keen interest in how the mainstream media has withheld disclosure of the full message to the public, a message based on hundreds of credible military and intelligence witness testimonies. Check out Dan's website, www.thewebmatrix.net, to learn more about the 70 plus years of guarded secrecy. Hi, Dan, how are you today? Thank you for joining me.
Karen, great to join you once again.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. You're so full of good information. I can't wait to hear what you have to say today. So maybe we could go back in time and talk. You could tell us about, what's going on and how we ended up here, what's been going on. And I'm sure I'll stop you when I have some questions. Thank you so much for being here.
That's a big question, isn't it? Dr. Stephen Greer, who's brought about all these witnesses. They have over 500 military intelligence witnesses, besides the 20 of which I was one, all stating we're willing to testify under oath before the mainstream media of the world. We had 22 cameras in the back row at the National Press Club, May 9th, 2001. The truth keeps its own best secrecy, because when you research enough, I've been researching kind of off and on since 1969, when I had a high-level top secret security clearance in the US Navy in the communications, and the ships were reporting extraterrestrial or whatever they were, German or it could have been one of several different things, but flying discs coming out of the ocean going thousands of miles per hour, tracked on ship's radar, being reported in secret classified reports to the Chief of Naval Operations. My testimony was minor compared to what the other testimonies were saying about there are bases on the other side of the moon, 57 different extraterrestrial species already categorized by the year 1989, nukes being shut down, flying over the nuclear silos, and all ICBMs being taken offline. NASA telling the astronauts to keep secret what happened when they went to the moon in 1969, and that the UFOs that appear in the images are being airbrushed in a special compartment in NASA. My friend Donna Hare. Let's see. Presidents, CIA directors, all being denied access. But we've had 0-point energy, that we haven't needed nuclear oil or coal for over 70 years, that we've had faster than light craft that were called alien reproduction vehicles that were built back in the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
All of this and much more was disclosed, all these witnesses, and each stating we're willing to testify under oath before a congressional hearing. Now, the mainstream...
How many witnesses were there altogether? Approximately.
Back then it was over 500 witnesses, of which 20 were willing to go before the cameras.
Okay, that's good to know, because there's a big difference between 500 and 3 or 500. You know what I mean? This is a lot of reputable testimony coming forward. This is not a small thing. Sorry, continue on.
Yeah, these are military witnesses, and people in the intelligence community, CIA, DIA, ONI. You had high-level people. But if you have an infiltration and you control the mainstream media, what they effectively did was they sanitized the testimonies so that when it came out, like CNN, for example, they start out with saying, is there life on other planets? Some people think they have proof there is. Elaine Tihanna explains. And basically what they did was they cut and sanitized it in such a way that the viewer, after having a hard day's work, having a beer, watching the 6 o'clock evening news, gets the impression, all these people, Dr. Greer, all these witnesses, they want to have a congressional hearing on the reality of UFOs, which isn't really going to grab your attention, like the government's been infiltrated by illegal operations, and that we have solutions. And this was 2001, when there was rolling blackouts in California, power outages and pollution concerns, and we had these technologies for over 70 years that have been withheld from the world. Afterward, I toured across I saw what happened, the place was packed, one of the largest events in the history of the National Press Club. I traveled in all the major cities, at least on the west side of the United States, and every time without exception, the media would come in and, make fun of it, in a way, use what's called the giggle factor. But the real truth keeps its own best secrecy, because all of this originated going all the way back to Nazi Germany. Actually, back in the 1920s, German secret societies were getting plans from Nordic extraterrestrials on a craft that could warp time around it. And this was written in ancient Sumerian script. Maria Orsich's father gave it to Professor Schumann at the University of Munich, and he found viable physics, and they started working on it. And by 1934, they had a first operational craft operating. The Nazi SS took over the operations. They had set up operations in Antarctica and had assistance from an extraterrestrial race called the Draco from the Sakar Empire, which gave them, this is all based on multiple witness testimonies, such as William Tompkins and many others. But I'm just going to cut right to try to go through all the references. If you want to look at all the references and the documents, I started collecting, after I saw what happened. Some media company out of Hollywood wanted me to write an article on the control of the media in regards to this subject. I started researching, and I based my research based on, I was aware of all these hundreds of testimonies, and became familiar with a lot of these witnesses. And so I knew, something was very real here, much more expansive than just my testimony. And that they basically, well, let's go back. Let's go back in time. What happened with the Nazi SS? They were given advanced technology, and by the time that James Forrestal, the Secretary of the Navy, sent Admiral Byrd down in 1947 to attack the Antarctic base, they had developed their anti-gravity craft with directed energy weapons and completely wiped out Admiral Byrd's Operation High Jump. And they had to come back. Everything was sworn to secrecy. The United States did not develop anti-gravity until about October of 1954. This was 20 years after the Nazis had this advance. And so this created an imbalance. And, people who are, science fiction fans that, love Star Trek back in the 60s, 70s, and so forth. This information was actually put out by the Office of Naval Intelligence in order to help bring out this information and seed it into the collective mind of the public. Things like warp drive and teleportation and all these things, and primarily was what was called the Prime Directive. The Prime Directive is essentially stating that an advanced race, there's different levels of civilizations across our galaxy. If an advanced race comes in and intervenes with an evolving race, such as on Earth, what happens is they upset the timeline, so to speak. They interfere with the natural evolution of the planet. And so part of the Prime Directive states that It's like a galactic federation of worlds that kind of oversees, our solar system and our possibly out in the galaxy as well. That if such an intervention occurs, that they have the moral responsibility in order to correct the situation, to create balance. And so, as William Tompkins testified, which I've done a lot of research into, the Nordic race, they look like Norwegian people, but they're part of the Galactic Federation of Worlds. So they call them Nordics. They have a Nordic space navy, you could say. They started intervening since there was a split that happened back in the late 40s between the Project RAN split into the Army Air Force, which turned into the Air Force in 1947, and basically put the Navy in a situation where it had to do its own program in secrecy. When that happened, the Nordics assisted the US Navy in order to create balance. They assisted them to the point where by the 1980s, they were able to launch the Solar Warden program, which is, they have about 8 huge cigar-shaped battle cruisers out there in space that the US Navy secret space program called the Solar Warden. When we gave our testimonies, it inspired a number of people. My good friend, Dr. Michael Salla, who's a world-renowned scholar on this stuff, was inspired by these testimonies and started doing a tremendous amount of research. I owe a great deal of gratitude for a lot of his in-depth research that has complemented my own independent research that, just completely complements each other. It also inspired a hacker in the UK, Gary McKinnon, who wanted to find out the truth for himself, especially when he heard, Don Hare talking about, the NASA, airbrushing UFOs and everything out. So he was able to hack into the Naval Space Command computer systems and indeed saw that there was a US Navy Solar Warden program, and he found fleet-to-fleet transfers of non-terrestrial officers. He saw images of huge cigar-shaped craft and craft that was listed that is not in the US Navy inventory of ships here on Earth, such as not the USS, but the USSS Hillenkotter, which happens to be the first CIA director, Roscoe Hillenkotter. And he was also the first MJ-12 director. And they also have the USSS Lee May, which was another MJ-12 member. And so the Bush administration was so upset that he released this information to the public. They wanted to put the guy away for 70 years in prison. And so this is not something he made up, and, today we have what I call the 21st century witnesses that are having total memory recall. The technology they have is like science fiction to most all of us on Earth. We see things in science fiction and we think, oh, that's just people's imagination, but they're able to recruit people, say when they're 17 or so, put them on a separate timeline, have them go up to the moon, the Lunar Operations Command, sign an agreement, 20 years of service in the US Navy Secret Space Program. And then at the end of their enlistment, they age reversed them back to where they were 17 years old and time reversed them back to the point where they were in enlistment. And then when 20 years goes along, now keep in mind, this is like in the 1980s. So around the year 2000 is about 20 years lapse. And so some of the first ones like Michael Ralph came out in the year 2000 and Randy Kramer and Michael Gerloff, you have Tony Rodriguez.
What about Emery Smith?
Hmm?
What about Emery Smith?
Oh, Emery Smith, the dear person. He wasn't recruited on, but he was brought into the secret underground base that is underneath Kirkland Air Force Base, and he was a medical technician that worked alongside the extraterrestrials. See, by 1946, they brought over Hitler's mastermind in underground bases, Xavier Dorsch, and the Monsanto Mountains right outside Kirkland Air Force Base. They started tunneling, and today they have, networks all over the planet. Hundreds of these deep underground military bases connected by maglev trains. And so he worked at one. I think it was, how many levels? Don't quote me exactly, 100 and some level or 80 some
It's
levels.
a lot of information, yeah.
Yeah, and so, Emery Smith, I've done a number of shows and interviews with him.
And Corey Good, would he be another one that was part of the secret? I got to tell you, I've seen different shows with people from the secret space program. Some of them just scare the hell out of me. I can't even watch the interviews. But other ones like Corey Good, I've heard his. But what I have experienced for myself to validate what you're saying is I myself, although I have no physical proof or evidence, have had extraterrestrial experiences, and I didn't remember them until the time was right. And when the time was right, I've had a specific purpose. This show is one of them, because it's to prepare people and help awaken people and be there for them so that they're not so freaked out. But I was wondering, I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but Dan, could we go back a little bit to the Nazi era? I have a couple clarifying questions just to keep us on track, because not all of our viewers have done the amount of research that I've done or even that you've done. Once we've been steeped in it for a while, we kind of, anyway, I just wondered if I could just ask you a couple questions.
Please, I love when people ask
Okay.
questions. People don't ask enough questions and
Oh.
in-depth questions,
I never-
and be able to back up with credible evidence the answers to those questions.
Right.
People don't want to look at it, people
Well,
stick in
I
front
never
of their
stopped.
television set.
Yeah, I never stopped questioning everything, unfortunately, or fortunately. Can we go back to when the Nazi movement first started? Did you say that they were initially, either they contacted them or the Nordics? Were the Nordics involved at all at that point with, with people from the Nazi movement or from the SS? Or was it just the reptilians? Or the Dracos, I forget.
It's my understanding that just, the secret societies going back to 1919, that from the Alberian constellation was interacting with them, and they had a benevolent bent, so to speak, unlike the Nazi SS.
Okay.
In fact, the virile and they wanted to see mankind brought to a higher level in a benevolent way. They detested what Hitler was doing and the Nazi SS, but eventually it became under Hitler's control with the Nazi SS, and they continued on with, in the 1930s, entering into the alliance, which turned the Nazi SS into what's known as the Dark Fleet, where they built craft and things like that to actually work alongside the Sakaar Empire or the Draco reptilians that would go and conquer other worlds. And this is not allowed by the Prime Directive.
Don't those beings know that? We're talking about the Dracos here, is that correct? I just want to make sure I'm using the right word. I get reptilians and Dracos mixed up. I think one's an offshoot of the other, but these beings that work with the SS and help them to develop the technology and all of that,
That was
Those,
the Draco.
yeah,
Yeah.
didn't they know that this was extremely harmful to the ecology of the universe, that this was like, do they know, or are they insane themselves that they would think that they would actually get away with it? What's your take on that?
Well, they get away with what they can get away with. The good thing that's kind of reassuring is that the Nordics have evolved far beyond where they are, and their technology is more advanced than, because they operate at a higher density, a higher frequency.
Yes. Yeah, that
And
makes
they
sense.
cannot reach that frequency, because of their nature. But they're very powerful in their own way, in their own right, and they are conquerors of worlds. What happened was, when all this happened in 1954, when President Eisenhower met with the Galactic Federation of Worlds, they attempted to warn them about the Draco was working alongside another nefarious race from the Orion group, the Greys, and they both aligned with each other to work together. And so the Nordics warned Eisenhower about them, that you can't trust them. And they offered to help us with our spirituality, help us with our lifespan, our health, improve life across the board, but they wanted us to relinquish our nuclear weapons. Now, what happened was, a lot of people blame Eisenhower for entering into what was called the Grenada Treaty, which allowed the abduction and allowed the use of underground facilities by the Greys and things on our planet to continue on with their hybrid program and their, experiments. What happened was MJ-12 cut a deal behind Eisenhower's back with the Orion group. There was witnesses at the first meeting with the Galactic Federation, such as Gerald Light, who said that it was his firm conviction that Eisenhower was going to go in May, which was like 2 or 3 months from then, on radio and television for public disclosure. See, if we were able to do the deal with the Galactic Federation, it would have been worldwide public disclosure and the truth brought out. But the Orion group, since they cut this deal, it needed secrecy. And so, of course, it needs secrecy. See, they wanted, MJ-12 group wanted the technology, which the Orion group was willing to give them some technology. And so it's probably why we achieved anti-gravity in 1954, which is shortly after that agreement happened. Also at the first meeting with Eisenhower was Cardinal Francis McIntyre, who broke his security oath. They had several different individuals from different disciplines and things like that to see what kind of reaction it would be. And he immediately flew to the Pope and spilled the beans. And, you look at the secret societies and the connections of the Knights of Malta, which serve the Pope and everything, such as Eisenhower himself was a Knight of Malta. Not to say that he wasn't wanting to do the right thing, but what happened was Alan Dulles, head of MJ-12, was a Knight of Malta, and many others that may have been, I'm speculating at this point, instruments for the Pope in order to have continued secrecy. There was documents that were leaked, MJ-12 documents in 1952, 2 years before this meeting, that the Vatican was working with the US government in order to maintain secrecy in case mass sightings ever occur. They even had a war plan set up in order to maintain the secrecy. The Vatican definitely wanted to keep this under the wraps. And so it seems like it all worked together, the whole secrecy thing. So that's why we haven't had disclosure is because of these treaties that were done with these nefarious groups.
Mhm. It seems to me like all the ones who wanted to, different groups, be they Earth people or off-worlders, it seems to me that they've all gravitated to each other to maintain the secrecy in order to profit and to also serve whatever their agendas are. But, you know, I often wondered how come, you know, there's got to be many different versions of what we would consider ET. Like, for instance, if we just look at how big this galaxy is, never mind the universe, it's so huge. And since time is not the way it's been constructed on Earth, not really, there are many beings who have had billions of years of advancement over Earth people. And it makes sense that there might be some that are not that far advanced ahead of us, except for maybe they got technology. Maybe they're like space pirates and stole it. I don't know. But there's many different levels. And as we go higher, we go into the more spiritual, more of the spiritual persuasion. And of course, you can't have that without having some concept of universal love and harmony. Anyway, what I guess I'm getting to is it does make sense that there are less developed groups of ET that would gravitate. And now we're ending up with sort of the results of them all working together for their own selfish reasons. But I've often wondered, why don't the higher level ETs just come in here and clean house and kick these nefarious ETs' asses? But then my spirit guides tell me it's because we as a humanity need to wake up, and we need to accept our own sovereignty, and we need to evolve in a way that these terrible things are actually shaking us up, waking us up, and giving us an opportunity for advancement. And indeed, I think it is our responsibility as human beings to advance and to become, a higher frequency so that we can be more in touch with the benevolent ETs. Anyway, I didn't mean to ramble on and on, Dan. I was just saying that because people that are watching this show are from all kinds, like some people only know about grays. They don't know about anyone else. They only know about reptilians. They don't know about anyone else. They don't know about these very highly evolved spiritual beings that are actually on our side. But what I also want to get to, and maybe you could speak to this, is come a time, if we don't sort it out for ourselves, is it in your opinion that the benevolent ETs will come in and will set the timeline straight?
Yeah, well, speaking of timeline and the research from multiple sources that I don't have firsthand experience and some documents that, researching all of this and collaborating with multiple different sources than Dr. Michael Sala's work. There is timeline wars. There is working through temporal wars. And a long story short, from what I understand, the Andromeda Council, which is one of these groups that are out there, they detected a galactic tyranny that happened 350 years in our future. And they were able to trace it back where the origin of this happened, right here on Earth, Moon, and Mars. And so this brought about the intervention of the Galactic Federation to come in and intervene. And it's my understanding that just this year that Mars was liberated, and that Sirius was liberated, where my friend Tony Rodriguez had to serve for about over 10 years, the Nazi colony there, and the Moon, and the deep underground military bases, which have a lot of horrific things going on, and that the the Draco and the Orion group were using. And so what has happened is this is incredibly good news that our solar system, now, if you take a public park, for example, you have like a game warden, right? And that warden makes sure that nobody's doing anything wrong or setting fires or killing animals and everything like that. Well, we have the solar warden is kind of like that for our solar system, where we don't have extraterrestrials coming in and violating the Prime Directive. And so that's what I believe, the origin of the title Solar Warden comes from. And so right now, even the head of the Israeli space program, it talked about the Galactic Federation and about the operations on Mars. I mean, you have highly credible people talking about this. That, sounds like science fiction to the average person that's been indoctrinated on this planet. So what we have now is just the Earth element that was working with these nefarious extraterrestrial elements to deal with. Now it's up to us, the people of Earth. No one's coming to save us. We have to awaken and we have to save ourselves. We have the ability to do it. That's the only reason I do these shows, even though it's like preaching to the choir, the people, watch these things. It's still putting it out there into the collective, and maybe it'll get somebody to question this and say, oh no, this is all BS, there's nothing to this, and I'm going to research this and find out. And then once they research, and it's like they'll go through one oh my god after another. Like I did, in 2001, I didn't know what Operation Mockingbird was. I had no idea that before the end of World War II, that the Nazis had a fallback plan called Weltanschauungskrieg. It translates to worldview warfare. They planned to infiltrate into the United States and control our education, our media, our pharmaceuticals, our NASA, the CIA, across the board, and put their people in top positions in order to create what's called a matrix of perception, which, when we're indoctrinated, you have to think about it. They think in terms of long-term, one generation being indoctrinated after the next generation. And you and I are of the age group that we remember a lot of things, that happened back then. But the new generation, they haven't a clue unless they've researched.
They're so well conditioned, they don't even know that they're conditioned.
Yeah. One of the first things they did, besides rewriting the history of World War II, which should be against the law, but the Rockefeller Foundation working in lockstep with the Nazis and their plan for eugenics and everything else, was 1950 Operation Mockingbird with Allen Dulles, who was infamous to the Nazi infiltration. Then later in 54, they set up the Bilderberg meetings, which they set their agendas, and they every year since 1983, the CIA meets with all the media or big tech in July of every year, which was 50 corporations that control media. Now there's only 6. They consolidated their control. The last meeting they had in July in Sun Valley, Idaho, was with Bill Gates and Biden's China-friendly CIA director, with all of big media and big tech, in a super secret meeting that the public doesn't know about. And they've put forth the agenda. And the Nazis had this ideology of, a master race, and they use slave labor, and they believe in eugenics, reducing the population. In fact, George H.W. Bush signed in 1992 agenda. I don't want to say certain words
That's
to
okay.
1 and 2030, which they plan to reduce dramatically the population of the Earth. And
Yeah, a new kind of warfare, really. Or maybe not new, but new to us.
billions of dollars go into think tanks, psychological think tanks that engineer our perceptions on the evening news to gain our consent of what they want to move forward on their agenda. And they have weaponized that evening news when you watch it to be used against us. Now, the ideologies of the Nazis are also shared very closely with that of the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, that have these same ideas of global dictatorship and utilizing these things. So you have a mainstream media that's highly weaponized, being used against our population today. And people who research this will find out this is very true. I also remember a story of this leftist gay liberal that was totally for Hillary, and a family member told him, CNN's manipulating the information. And he says, no, they're not. It's all truthful. And so a family member, challenged him, and it wouldn't have, unless it was a family member, he looked into it and he said, oh my God, they did do that. And then he started researching a little deeper and then found out. And then what happens is somebody who's totally in belief of what they've been putting out on the mainstream media, when you find you've been completely deceived, you become 180 degrees. You all of a sudden, he started the walkaway movement several years ago, where people were walking away from what, the Democratic the Democratic Party has basically been infiltrated. It's not the Democratic Party of John F. Kennedy.
No,
it's not the same.
Not even close.
So anyway, I know we're getting close to wrapping up part one.
Yeah, this is just part one, folks. So please do come back next week for part two. I'm going to ask Dan about how, because we've touched on basically how the CCP is tied in with the Nazi movement and common goals. I'm going to ask you next on how and if the Jesuits are also tied up in all of this. It seems like there's a whole lot of different people in groups in the same basket, and to try to get our minds wrapped around how incredibly complex and well thought out and strategized all of this is. No wonder it's hard for people to believe. But, the purpose of this show is to feed the awakened people, and especially the newly awakened that are just starting to go down the rabbit holes. This is going to give you so much information and great places to go, not to mention Dan's website. Be sure to check out Dan's website, and it's going to be featured in the links below. So we're just going to say goodbye for today, and we'll see you for part two. Make sure you come back and join us next week.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for joining us for the Quantum Guide Show. Become the change you wish to see in the world. Subscribe to Karen's YouTube channel, click the like button, and share this show with your friends. Check out Karen's website at KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com. All the links are available in the description box below. Until the next time, keep up the good work.
Surrendering to endlessness puts all my inner strife to rest. For time gives birth to hurriedness. It all makes sense, well, more or less, and the sages put me to their test. With heart and soul, I'll do my best to find the answers to my quest. I wonder and